Hi, I'm Mac McCarthy, and I help people with their breakups. And today, the topic's going to be, I want to break up, we just don't have sex anymore. Can we fix this? Surprise, surprise, this is a very common problem in relationships. And a lot of times people don't talk about it. They actually make it about something else. They stack a few more problems on top of it. They don't want to use the word sex as being a problem. It's personal. And when they discuss it with friends, they don't really like to go there too. Some people are really private about that sector of their relationship. And it's interesting because I've had a few clients recently that have come to me for breakups in the past or in new relationships, and this becomes an issue. And what happens is that you get comfortable, you get really comfortable, monotonous, boring, predictable, and it takes away from the intimacy. But then people they build a case. They say, well, it's because of this, it's because of that, it's because of this, it's because of that. Well, I'm getting older now. Well, I'm just tired. Reality is something's missing in attraction. There always is. So we're gonna fully unpack that today. I'm gonna get into it down the road. I also have a email that was sent in about an issue that's not on topic, but everyone likes stories or real scenarios from clients that type in their story and send it in. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But let's get into this topic right now, and please put in the comments below if this has actually happened to you in a relationship before, where you've been in a relationship and the intimacy just goes to literally dry up, and you start to do you blame the other person? So usually a lot of times people, instead of trying to find a solution, they actually complain about it. Like, we just don't do it anymore. It's like, well, what would be the solution? Well, she's just always tired, or she always just tells me this. But are you guys trying new things? Are you making an effort? Are you solution-based or problem-based? There's a difference. So I'm going to talk about that today. But let's put this question out there first. And this is a nice way to lead with this topic. A lot of times, when you have problems in your life, when you have issues, regardless of what they are, and you're trying to sort it out, when you go to someone like a coach like myself, you go to a therapist, a lot of times they just give you a really good question for you to chew on that you haven't considered. And that question, with the right audience, can go a long way in you figuring out where you're headed. And the question I would ask, if you're in this situation right now where you want to break up, we just don't do it enough, you have to decide, how important is sex and intimacy to you in your relationship? Now, some people from the outside, some people out there, oh yeah, it's incredibly important. It's just, some people it's not. This is something I've learned in coaching and talking to a lot of different people. People can define the rules and regulations and what's important and what's not important in their own relationships. And there's never been more of a time than now that people create their own importance, right? Of what's good, what's important, what's not. Because really, there's some people out there that go, it's not that big a deal for me. It's really not. Okay. And then there's circumstances that people have to make a decision on. They're married, they're with a long-term partner, and there's possibility of some kind of health issue. I've seen this before, where the individual can no longer have intimacy at that level. And they have to make a decision. Am I okay with this? Can I deal with this in the name of love, in the name of unconditional love? Right? So you have to decide, instead of complaining that intimacy is a problem in your relationship or blaming the person you're with, how important is it to you? On a scale of 1 to 10, is it, so, like I said, there's some people out there that can be in a marriage for 30 years and they haven't slept in the same room for 10 years. Now, in my experience as a breakup coach, one of the most common things I come across is individuals that have been in those long-term relationships. And what I would say is anything over 5 years at this point in the 21st century is a lifetime achievement award in relationships for a lot of people. 5 to 10 years. You get into 10, 15 years, a lot of people, their feedback is, we were done a long time ago. We checked out 4 or 5 years ago. We still love each other. We still care about each other. The intimacy just cut. Now, why is that? Why is that? I think what you'd have to do in a study is probably, rather than go to here's the thing about a study about relationships and sex. I don't know how honest people are going to be, right? If it's a questionnaire, people don't like to be dead honest about that kind of stuff. But it would be more interesting to go to couples that have a flourishing sex life in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, which is quite possible. There's this individual that they had a documentary on, and I can't remember the documentary, but this guy used to have an infomercial on TV where he would get government money, and it was on late at night, and he made a lot of money doing these infomercials, and he always looked like he was in this outstanding, excited, and happy mood. And in the documentary, it was kind of wild because he had his wife, and he basically seemed like he was retired at this point. He no longer had these infomercials where he was basically selling ways for you to get government grants for money. He used to have these question marks all over his suit. Put it in the comments if you know the guy I'm talking about. And during this documentary, he seemed just incredibly happy. And when you meet someone that's incredibly happy and genuinely happy, they smile a lot. And they don't just smile, they smile like it lights up the room. Like I said, he's financially stable. He was proud about the business he had done. His wife was no longer working. They seemed quite happy. So anyways, where I'm going with this, they were interviewing him, and something came up, and he goes, well, they were talking about his, him and his wife, and I believe they didn't have kids. And he was like, wow, well, one of the things is, he goes, I just have an incredible sex drive, and he started laughing. And this guy, late 50s, early 60s, at least, and his wife started laughing, and I'm thinking to myself, so what's the recipe for that? Right? Why not study the people that it really works out for? Now, one of the things was this guy was a runner, so he's active, he's exercised, he's financially stable, he's very happy with who he is and what he is. He's happy overall. But one of the things that stands out that I don't think people look at in a relationship that's going to sustain intimacy is your schedule. What's your schedule? What's your priorities? So I think if someone's working overtime, I've known people that are high volume, high hours, working 90 hours a week, 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week. Those people, they're probably not going to have the energy to have a good, intimate life. But on the flip side, they're putting money and work ahead of that. But when you start to live together, right, you have chores, you have to clean the dishes, the garbage goes out unless you have a maid. That's why, going back to this guy, what's interesting is he had money, they were able to travel, they were able to do things, they were able to spend a lot of time together that wasn't stressful. Think about that for a moment. Well, if you, and by the way, if you have outside things in your life that are stressful, let's say that your partner's family, this is a common one right now I've been coming across, and the economy with COVID and whatnot, and different sectors have been really hit hard. Let's just put together this scenario that I've seen. The person you're with, family lost their jobs. They had a family business, and because of COVID, it was a tourist-based business, or it was a business-based that was hurt by what's going on right now. And basically, they're treading water, and your partner's stressed out because they need to come up with extra money for their family. And you're like, how does this relate to intimacy? It does. It actually does. Because stress and worry kill the libido. Because if someone's in their free time and they're worried about a family member, they're worried about how they're going to get them money, and you, the partner, the one they lean on, can't help them with that problem financially or supportive, it's not going to help when you want to go in the bedroom and get it on. And so there's a lot more layers to why it's wrong than someone just saying no, or I'm not attracted to you. But what people will do is they'll build a case, and they'll grab from the grab bag, and they'll say, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, oh, I'm just tired, oh, I'm just getting older now, let's just do it tomorrow, right? But I've talked about it before, the book Mating in Captivity, which is a great title, Esther Perel. One of the things she comes back to again and again is getting space, being able to do your own thing, being able to be sick of each other and get that time away from each other. But the problem is one of those things that a lot of times people just touch it on the surface. They don't dig deeper. They actually attach other things to it. But you have to come back to that. How important is it to you to have good intimacy in your relationship, or regular intimacy? You know, a lot of people will gauge it. Oh, we've only done it once a month for the last 2 years. There was a client of mine in their late 20s. This is a couple years back. You would never know it. You would never know it. The way she described the relationship, the way, you know, she had everything going for herself. She seemed like the boyfriend was great. And she's going on, and she's like, we only had sex 3 times last year. Shocking. She's like, we do other things, though. We do other things sometimes. Shocking. Late 20s. Now, she said they were together 7 or 8 years, and the last 2 or 3 years that it got progressively worse. She didn't realize, because they just surface-based touch this as, you know, I'm tired, or just what we do. She never really got to the bottom of it. She realized later on that after they broke up, because I was like, there's something here. And then when she did a little bit of work, and we and her talked about it, basically what happened is that when she was in her early 20s, she had gotten pregnant, not planned. I believe she had an abortion. And so it was stuck in her mind that it wasn't good to have sex. And so that she didn't even know that was affecting her. And that's why from the outside, it would just be like, oh, I don't feel, and she created all these other things. I don't feel like it. Oh, we do other things. She never got to the root of the problem until they broke up. And she was like, I got to figure this out. Right. And the guy, by the way, let it go on for a long time. He let it go on for a long time. He accepted it. He didn't make a big deal out of it. And then one day he just broke up with her, and she was absolutely shocked. That's one of those breakups that has to happen. Right. So a client I just had recently with this same problem, and he's basically going through deciding about this. I said, look, one thing that you can do, because they live together, is I said, why don't you take a week and go away on your own? Go stay at a hotel, a retreat. Doesn't have to be extravagant, but get out of the house. You guys live together, get away. Okay? And do some journaling. And ask yourself some important questions. And so I said, look, I'll write out some questions for you. And so I'm going to share those questions right now. Number 1. What do I want right now in this relationship? What do I want long term? So this is a question that someone's going to ask while they're still in the relationship. Their intimacy is not great. There's some blame going on here. There's some misunderstandings. It's not working. What do I want right now in this relationship? What comes up when you journal that out? When you answer a question like this and you journal out stuff, you just write, don't fight. Just write, don't fight. Just first thing that comes up and just get it all out. Don't negotiate it. That's the thing when you talk to other people, you think, oh, how are they going to judge me what I say? No. Number 2, where do I want to be as an individual in the next 5 years? So a lot of you are like, oh, I've heard you ask that one before, Mark. Okay. Follow-up question, does she help me get there? That's big. Actually, this should be a question that I thought about this. This should be something that you probably ask yourself once a year when you're in a relationship. And I don't mean help doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing something for you. I would just say the fact that they just support what you want to be or what you want to do in a way that you feel good about it. They don't necessarily need to do any of the work that you need to do. It's like I'm writing this book, right? I've put it to the side. If I've got a girlfriend that's supporting that, doesn't mean she's got to help me write the chapters or anything like that. It just means that she needs to be understanding and supportive of the fact, like, I think you can write it. Whereas you can easily have someone in your life that you could be striving towards something and they literally will be there with a fire extinguisher every time you get excited about it and tell you about the downside, or you'll probably never get it done, or you always talk about that. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like there's partners out there like that they don't even know they're doing it, by the way. And we could just go with the simple term, oh, they're just negative. But a lot of times you're excited about doing something. Translation, they don't have much shit going on in their life. They don't have the courage, the gusto, the guts to go after something that's interesting in their own life. And so you bring something up and they're like, yeah, that's never going to happen. Or, this is an example. Say you're going to start a business. Let's just say you're going to, like, I want to, and your partner's like, well, what about taxes? Well, what about the fact that, if you start that, then you don't have medical or you don't have this. Now, those are fair questions, but if they make it out to be this, they're filtering for things that will pull you down, second guess that, because it's not comfortable to them for you to shine. Now, how does this apply to the issue of intimacy? Right? If you say having a healthy sex life is something that really adds to your life, and there's some people that when they're starting a new business is like, I don't want to be in a relationship. I understand that, because relationships take work. Dating takes a little bit of work. If you want to spin plates, that's going to take some work. It's going to take some time. So the other question I said to ask, where am I at blame for the lack of intimacy? This is something I see come up a lot. People point the finger. Oh, they don't do this. They don't respond to me this way. So if you just take a minute and you're like, where am I at to blame here? Am I at my physical best or near it? Someone's lacking intimacy with you and you just gained a whole lot of weight. You're not the same person you were. It's not shallow for them to say, look, you're getting fat. I had that happen one time. I remember. I had it happen we were together for 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 years, and she's like, look, you're getting fat. And I was. And I was drinking a little bit more extra than I usually did, and I wasn't exercising as much. And at first I kind of got upset by it, but then I went, yeah, all right. And then immediately I was supported to do more to do more exercise. And when I got my weight down a little bit, the relationship changed. And it didn't bother me, but to say something's actually a good thing. Be transparent. Be transparent. Thanks, Clutch. How you been, bud? Maybe it's just too loud. So going back to the questions, is in this particular case, the individual was dating someone that was older, so their intimacy's been down, and she's a little bit older than him. And I said, is that going to be an issue in the future? Because if that's going to be how she makes her case of why, and I've seen this before, it's like, well, I'm getting older now. It's like, well, there's people out there that in their 50s or 60s have incredible sex lives, so they say, right? Number 5, what if everything went right in this relationship? How would things look next year? Is it just about the intimacy? 6, do I believe her reasons for a lack of intimacy? This is a big one. So someone comes up, this is a personal attack on you? Someone comes up with their reasons why, right? The brain works this way. They come up with reasons. I'm just getting older now and I don't have the same feelings. I'm stressed from work. I just don't have the extra time, right? They have a little grab bag of things and they throw them on the table. This is why we're not getting intimate anymore. Here's a good question. This is one I told him to journal out. Do you believe her? Gets real right there, right? Do you believe her? Because what your mind does is like, are you still attracted to me? Do you still like getting intimate with me? What happens once intimacy comes to a halt, right? You start second guessing things, which becomes unattractive. And a lot of times it's one small domino. So for example, I've heard this from guys many times. They've gotten shut down 2 or 3 times when they wanted to do it. And then their brain goes, well, I'm not going to try again because I don't like rejection. And it seems like she's going to do that again. And then the domino starts that I want it, but I don't want to try because I was pushed away last time. It becomes a negative experience. And then you just can't even remember when it was good. And then you guys don't talk to each other about it. And someone just drops the card on the table. Oh, I'm tired. Oh, it's too much. Oh, it's that. Right? And it's like this individual I was talking to, I was like, if it is just sex, if it is just that, then maybe you just go to a sex therapist. Well, I don't want to go to that. Right? And then the other thing is I've had friends do this. Well, if you're going to shut me down, I'm going to just start cheating. I think she kind of is. Right? Another question. Can you honestly see this relationship getting better? Sometimes your brain gets to a point where you're like, I don't see it getting better. So you start filtering for even the positives aren't going to be good. Now, one of the other things I suggested to this individual was he's become needier, which is highly unattractive to women. He's asking for her approval on things. Do you still like me? Are you still attracted to me? Literally, right? I said you can't. Once you start asking these things, you're not making decisions, and it comes off highly unattractive. He said, "Well, I don't want to have to do that when I'm in a relationship now. I just want to be myself." I said, "But regardless if you break up or you don't break up, you need to brush up on attraction again." So I gave him the books that we had gone over before, No More Mr. Nice Guy, Models, Tactical Guide to Women. Brush up on this stuff on my notes section of my website. Right? Brush up on it. Because even though some people joke around about Corey Wayne saying to read his book 10 or 15 times, I understand why he says that. I don't know if that's the book to read 10 or 15 times, right? It's like the Bob Proctor or some of these gurus out there for making money. They read Think and Grow Rich like the Bible. They're highly successful. Am I saying for you to do that? No, it's up to you. But is there value in the sense that you do need to brush up or read things 3, 4, 5 times to get it? Yeah. Yeah. So you go back to these, and now, like I said, you can look up the notes if you don't want to have to read the whole book, if that's not your thing. People's attention spans have become increasingly smaller and smaller. So that's where you take accountability, because I think a lot of guys do this. You get in a relationship and you go, okay, I'm set. And I would even say, like, this happens with jobs. This happens once you get what you want. So let's just say maybe it's not the American dream anymore, but it was the American dream for a long time. Get a house, get a car, get a job with benefits, with a pension, with job security, right? The amount of people that tell me like their number one goal is to own a house, right? It's a huge one. Let's just say you get all those things. Let's say I've known someone I'm thinking of right now that is a family member that I don't speak to very much anymore. So I said was. But he got everything he wanted by like 25. Including the pool table in the garage. You know, that was one of his big things, different things like that. And then it was like, once he got the pool in the backyard, it's like, I never heard of any more ambition or any more things that they wanted. And then the job sucked, got laid off, went out on a disability, and things just spiraled out, because it was like, once you get to the mountaintop, it's like, all right, what's next? What's next? I got all those things. And where am I going with this? Sometimes once you get the girlfriend that you wanted, that you were dating and courting, and before you ended up sleeping together, you thought, oh my goodness, if me and her end up together, this is just going to be golden, grand, wonderful, fantastic, beautiful, sensational. And then you get there, and it is. And then suddenly it's like, yeah, I got it. And then you're having regular intimacy. You start to slide off a little bit. You start to put in less effort, and then you get rejected. You're like, hey, wait a minute. I thought we had a deal here. We're together. I'm not supposed to work for this. I don't want to play games anymore. Right? Huh. I don't know why that's coming up on my screen. You want to jump in on this one? You want to jump in on this one, Mr. Clutch? You do still like me. Are you still attracted to me? Are the questions that are the beginning of the end if a guy acts like that. Why is this showing on the video resolution? That's pretty annoying. Man. Larry Love Jr. How's Larry Love Sr. doing? Yeah, this is, why would this? The needy guy typically never makes a comeback. Well, sometimes it's one of those things that you can learn about attraction. You can learn how to date and do those things. But then you revert back into your old ways, right? You'll revert back into your old ways. And the reason for that is that you like the comfort, right? You like the comfort. This is bothering me that this screen's showing error occurred. Hold on a sec, Clutch. Revert back to the comfort zone. Yes, I've done it. I've done it in previous relationships. I can look back and be like, yeah, I got in the comfort zone. And the funny thing is I've said this before, guys, when they're in the comfort zone and stuff comes up, they don't really want to deal with it. They don't really want to hash it out or talk about it a lot of times. They just want their intimacy. They don't want to be like, wait a minute, am I being a little bit of a wuss here? So they'll literally be like, how can we just make this quick? How can we just fix this? A lot of times they don't want to talk it out. A lot of times. Well, the stream's healthy. All right. We'll call you up, Clutch. Let's see here. Let's see here. I think I can get you in. All right. It didn't go. It didn't go on. Oh, it's not coming in. Shit. Let's see here. There we go.
How's that?
Mr. Clutch, how you doing, bud?
Good, brother. How you doing?
Alive and well. How's Callie treating you?
Callie's very, very good. Very busy with work, trying to keep busy. And I don't know if you're noticing this, showing an influx of people requesting coaching, and I'm having to tell multiple people, hey, I can't coach while I'm in the U.S. So, unfortunately.
Is that breaking your heart?
Partially, because I want to help people, but at the same time, I'm only one man. I only have so much bandwidth and free time.
Yeah. Well, is that a possibility of you? Do you want to do it in the future, or do you prefer your current job better?
I would love to do it as a pastime in the future, and if it grows, we'll see where it goes. But it's just the legal obligations here, being a foreigner in the U.S. They're very strict on their visa restrictions, so I just don't want to mess with it.
Yeah, because it's public too, right? It's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, even if it wasn't, it's just why bite the hand that's giving you an opportunity, right?
So if you did it and you were if you weren't an independent contractor doing it, where you worked for a company, could you do it then?
Not necessarily, because I'm here on a very specific work visa. Yeah,
I see what you
exactly.
mean. Okay.
So they're very particular on what I can and cannot do. I could theoretically apply for an independent work visa on my own, but the truth of the matter is, with my current company, we're already in talks about me potentially getting a green card in the future. So once that green card's in, and once I don't have to worry about the immigration, we'll circle back. I'm still putting out content, maybe not as religiously as I used to, but it's a case where I would love to circle back and have this as a hobby, because, I enjoy the community. I enjoy helping people, and I enjoy, interacting with people like yourself who are always a pleasure, right?
Yeah, no, me too. No, I get it. Yeah, I know from being somewhere myself and having a visa. so in the it's funny because I'm American. It's the citizenship maybe you want in the future or something like that, and I'm somewhere else, and I know exactly what you mean. So I've been in that boat before. So yeah, I want to break up. We don't have sex or enough intimacy. This is a common theme. What's your take on this, bud?
Very common theme, especially amongst Americans more than anything else I found.
Really?
Yeah, particularly Americans. Like Europeans, the intimacy aspect, they don't tend to struggle with it as much. Like it's still there, but I find it's especially true, especially in the western part of the U.S., where this seems to be a recurring theme because there's a heavy emphasis on, physique, social value, presence, dominance. All these aspects build up to something. And if you're in a relationship, particularly between a man and a woman, where the woman has this association of you being the leader of men, any slip up, and you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier, where men get comfortable. It's an aspect where it's very hard to recover from that spiral, and many men don't recover from that spiral, and it results in the demise of the relationship.
Yeah, it's one of those things too. It's like what I said earlier. I don't know if you were on yet, but I said it would be interesting to look at the people that it's not a problem, right? Because you're wondering, because there are people out there 50s and 60s and 70s. It's like I think of my grandmother, and my grandmother was in her 80s in a home, and she was talking about hooking up with a guy at the place, and we're like, Grandma, come on. Like don't bring that up. But she would. She was like, she was highly sexual at like 70s, and that was her personality, and she would talk about it. And so it's like, it's not impossible. When someone just goes, oh, age or this, there's definitely some health things that people have that I wouldn't combat, or, that say that it's not possible. But the idea of it just going away like that, there's certainly things where this current guy that I just talked to yesterday, it's a client of mine. It's like the excuses that his girlfriend came up with, it's just brick wall. It's like, oh, and then what's one of the worst is, and this is not just her, right? Well, I have friends that are in relationships that have the same problems. And I'm like, well, that's not, you know what I mean? I'm not your friend, hun. It's like,
yeah.
Right? It's like, you don't throw that one on the table. Like, I have friends, you can talk to them, like they go through the same things. That doesn't validate us not getting intimate. You know what I mean?
Well, the problem I find with most men whenever they do hit this wall, and every relationship has its dry spells. Like we all go through a stage where, we maybe not be getting enough intimacy or as much as we would like. Like me personally, I have a very high libido. So it's not unheard of, and I hope this isn't TMI for most people, it's not unheard of that when I'm in a relationship, I'm having sex every day. Mm-hmm. That's just the nature of how I am. And most women that I start dating will say, oh, it will calm down once the honeymoon phase. And then, I've gone into my longer term relationships where it's been 3 years, and the girl's like, oh my God, you're not slowing down. It's like, no, I'm not. It's just the nature of how I am.
So why do you think that is? Do you think that's nature, or do you think that's your personality, or you think that's your needs? Why would you say that?
Probably a mix of genetics and social upbringing, because, my particular situation, you and I have talked about my upbringing. My sexual liberation was a form of independence for me. So it's a question of not only am I showing that I'm free in the sense of I'm free to do these things that I enjoy, but it's also a form of power in the sense where I'm getting validation for who I am as a result of it, which isn't in the long term, at least obsessively, isn't really healthy. But we all have that need to be validated by our partners, right? So, the biggest validation a woman can give you, and I've told you about this in the past in our live streams, the biggest validation a woman can give you is to have sex with you, because she literally cannot be more vulnerable physically at any other moment in her life than she is when she's being intimate with you. So it's a high level of trust, and it's a high level of validation, especially for one's ego.
And has a woman had a problem, the fact that you want to do it every day?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not that it's a problem, but there's definitely some resistance, especially when we get into the routines of, I've had a long day. And don't get me wrong, there are days where I put my hands up in the air. I say, I just don't want it. Like, we all have our off days. But what I often find, especially as we start entering from the honeymoon phase into the power struggle phase of a relationship, this dynamic of me having a hard day is used as a means of justifying lack of intimacy. And the word compatibility usually gets thrown out a fair bit. And I've mentioned to you, I don't really believe in the term compatibility, at least when it comes to the concept of collaborations in a relationship. What I do believe is in maturity. And maturity has an aspect of, are you able to communicate with this other partner and build a level of rapport and build something that includes some troubleshooting, specifically emotional troubleshooting. The problem that most men have is they try to tackle these kind of problems from a logical standpoint. They'll say, well, I have physical needs, and, if you cared about me, you would give these physical needs, and, I sacrifice so much for you. That's not how the brain of a woman works, nor is it going to ever convince any woman to sleep with you. Like, you essentially built this attraction through a series of emotional progressions, whether you were consciously aware of them or not. So when you find yourself in these, quote, dry spells, the worst thing you can do is try to sit down with a woman and convince her why she's wrong. And this is what I find most men tend to do.
So what would be the best thing?
The best thing would be to re-engage emotional rapport building and emotional connection. It might not necessarily be something as simple as, being physically intimate or treating her like, a sexual object. But it's a case where the best thing that you can do for a woman in order for her to want to be intimate with you is to make her feel safe. And it's not to say that men, quote, make their woman feel unsafe at any way, shape, or form. But the level of safety that is required for intimacy to take place is essential. So if she's stressed about work, for example, let's say she's having a dramatic altercation with another woman in the workplace, which is more common than most people think. The best thing that we can do is not necessarily dismiss that story, but ensure that no matter what, she's going to be okay. And of course, the other aspect is, of course, physical escalation. Not to say that, when she says no, you continue escalating. That's not what I'm talking about. But there's an element of, there's a way of being playful about it, being, nonchalant about it, not making it a big deal. Because the bigger deal you make it, the harder it is to tackle. And of course, the more time that we spend not being intimate before we know it. And I've seen this happen with some of my coaching clients. It's been a couple of years or 3 or 4 years since these people have been intimate. And somehow they're still together for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I said in the beginning of the live stream today, and I was writing after I have a coaching client, I'll go through some notes and thoughts from our talk. And one of the things I just said was, like, you got to ask yourself, how important is it to you? Because some people can, and what I've realized is we have our own morals and values. Some people will say it's not that important to me. I'm not going to talk you into making it important. But you have to ask yourself, is it an important thing to you that you're somehow your girlfriend has made it like, well, it's not that important because we love each other. And is it important to you as an individual to have good intimacy and have it regular, and you've had it before? Because you can go on the internet or YouTube now and build a case any way you want to, right? You can find supporting evidence for everything and anything. Your partner can too, but you got to ask yourself, wait a minute, like, is it important? Am I getting duped into changing my belief? And the reality is, like you said, 2 years can go by. Like I said, this relationship that client I had in the past, this woman that was in her late 20s, it was just unbelievable because she was really upset. She was attractive. She had a lot going for her. They had money. Even after she just broke up, she had guys, coming to work. She was that attractive. Like, they were on the doorstep sending flowers. And you're just like, what? This guy, and she couldn't believe this guy broke up with her. And then we're talking. And this is why coaching is good, because you actually divulge what really happened instead of just telling your friends surface shit. That's not the real nitty gritty. And it was like, yeah, well, I was like, so how was, your intimacy? Oh, we only had sex 2 or 3 times a year for the last 2 years. Excuse me? You were going to say that to me 20 minutes in? As you were shocked why you guys broke up? Excuse me? Like, whoa.
Well, for for some people, it's really down that list, and like, especially when it comes to the concept of the way people emotionally rationalize their thoughts, right? Like, this is, you and I run into this all the time, where like the friends and family get involved and they all give their opinions, and they give their opinions with good intentions. But then, you divulge the history of each one of these people. It's just like, oh, well, my sister said I should dump him. It's like, well, what's your sister's experience? Oh, she's 3 times divorced. It's just like I wouldn't take instructions on how to fly a plane from a kamikaze pilot. Like, why would you take relationship advice from someone that clearly doesn't have a stable relationship or a stable concept on how to connect with another human being?
Yeah.
And it's funny how often relationships break down this way. And we've talked about the dynamics of mom being probably the most influential emotional figure in any family household, regardless of whether it's a man or a woman.
Right.
So, of course, we run into these problems where you usually have vicarious tendencies in the advice that they tend to give their children. And of course, we get into another concept altogether, which is how do you build intimacy in a relationship where intimacy is just dead? And oftentimes, usually these relationships end up ending because you can't build that situation. Like you talked about the ranking of like what intimacy is for you on a personal level when it comes to relationships. For me, it's number 1. Like, most people are surprised to hear that. They're like, oh, really? It's not like security or emotional support? I'm like, no. Like, it's physical intimacy. And then number 2 is emotional maturity and support, because I can handle myself one way or another. But if I'm with you and we're lacking intimacy, that causes a lot of unnecessary stress in my life.
And with watching something like Dr. Phil or some of these other shows, like, you'll be duped into like, well, you shouldn't think it's number 1. And my point is, now doing this for a while, if it's number 1, like you just said, number 1's this, number 2's this. What if someone had your number 2 as number 1 and had intimacy as number 2? You'd say, okay. If that's how you gauge it, I'm not saying what's right for any individual, because you have to maneuver that, but actually be honest with yourself. It's just like the amount of guys, the one that comes along the most is the guy that's with a woman that treats him like crap, calls him names, lies to him, and then it comes down to, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hot is she? Oh, she's an 11. Oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, what was your intimacy? It's a 10. Connection's like a 6, 7. What's your trust? 2. It's like, whoa. It happens all the time,
Of course it does.
And they're going, they're just complaining, and I call it like whistle blowing. Like you're blowing the whistle, like, this person stole my heart, arrest them, throw them down. No one cares that much. That's the thing when you go around telling everyone, this person was a liar to me, this person did this, and I'm like, let's get to the core. Why are you still entangled with them? As men, about 80 or 90% of the time, they'll stay entangled because it was good intimacy or she was really good looking. And the ironic thing is, the flip side of that is trust, security, comfort, so connection. Some guys will stay in a long-term relationship like that minus the good intimacy because they're comfortable, but really they're not that happy, right? And they build resentment through it. So it is this thing that's kind of a battle. But that one always comes up in a breakup, especially a guy that's with a woman that's, I would say, 8 to 9 years plus younger. They tend to be a little bit more insecure about that. They're much more excited about the fact that they're with a woman that's younger and better looking in their eyes, and so they overlook the fact that they get treated like crap. Right? They just keep telling you it over and over again. Like, she did this, she did that to me. So why do you want her back? Well, we had a good connection. She was there for me. Let me ask you this: the intimacy, yeah, it was outstanding. Okay, that's the core problem here. Okay, let's just be honest. It's okay.
Well, the reverse is true as well. Like, I remember when I was coaching, I used to tell people, specifically in long-term relationships, who would get into arguments over the silliest things. Like, we got into an argument because you didn't call me after lunch or after a coffee, or you forgot to text me back regarding this small little mediocre thing that means absolutely nothing. And what I usually tell these couples when we'd sit down with both of them and say, look, you'd be surprised the amount of problems that would get solved with a simple blowjob. And it's just, it doesn't happen when it comes to long-term relationships. Like, intimacy, guys, is a big thing in any relationship, regardless of how superficial or how spiritual it is. There is no physical activity that is more intimate that you can have with another human being than sexual. So, like, sex includes things like emotions, trust, love, or even if it's not love, like lust. It's emotions that are powerful. They define you. They are literally the reason you exist on this planet, is to survive and replicate. So if you can build a relationship with someone and exclude that element of it, you're more than likely going to have problems. Of course, there are other extremes as well, where there are people that don't enjoy intimacy, but they're usually far few in between, I find.
Well, in that case, there's usually like that case I was talking about earlier. We ended up finding out that she did not like having intimacy. She didn't want to have it 2 or 3 times. There was a blockage there from a past experience in her life that was making it that sex was bad. That sure. She didn't, and that's usually what it is a lot of times. But people come back to this again and again. But there are times I think that, talking to people that have been married for 25 years, I've had clients like 25 years, 20 years, and it just got stale, bored. They haven't been, neither of them want to try after 4 years. I think that there can be a burnout, right? Like, that is possible, that you just, it's just no longer there. It's just,
there is something to be said about resentment and its effects in long-term relationships. I resent you because you're not sleeping with me. I resent you because you expect me to deliver this intimacy that I'm not in the mood for, which as men, we always deal with that escalation. We always deal with that last minute resistance, as we talk about in the pickup community, where there's an element that, look, if she's emotionally not there, the likelihood that intimacy is going to happen is going to be very small. And even if it does happen, it's not going to be enjoyable for her. Mm-hmm. So why would she want to give that up?
Mm-hmm. And the other one's contempt, right? Contempt's one of those ones that that builds up sometimes, I think, if people are growing in different directions in a long relationship. Feeling that person is beneath consideration or or worthless. And I've read about that before in a couple books, that if contempt gets its way into a long-term relationship, it's hard to get out of. That's a tough one too. That's the beginning of an end for a lot of people, but they'll continue on with it sometimes.
Sometimes it depends on the people. Like, usually the type of people that tend to fall in that notion of contempt are usually the type of people that haven't had stable support growing up. So there's this element that, like, a person that has this condescending notion towards the people around them, for example, usually is like this because they've either lacked a voice growing up or they've lacked security. So it's very easy for me, for example, if I've never had a parent figure stick through me or support me in times of vulnerability, to look at someone else at a moment of vulnerability, because guess what? We're human beings. We're going to be vulnerable, no matter how strong we are, no matter how macho we are. And, I get comments on my channel all the time from people saying, hit up the gym, make money, screw these people. Like, we have to, just find the next one. There's millions of fish in the sea. You can tell they're hurt on a deep and emotional level. But they're like that for a reason. And of course, a lot of people who refuse to get that psychological help, either A, because they don't know they actually need the help, or B, the most likely notion, they're still in the form of denial. They're not in a position to connect with anyone emotionally, let alone intimately. So what often happens, and we see this recurring, those individuals that tend to be promiscuous, both men and women, are usually like that because either A, there's some form of sexual abuse there that they're trying to manifest as an adult and take control of, or B, they don't recognize that vulnerability aspect of relationships. So they project this need to feel wanted through the act of intimacy, but their relationships never last very long. because they have that inability to remain emotionally vulnerable with their partners.
It's a lot to gather. So you're missing
Definitely.
So you're missing coaching, huh? You're missing the drama.
I mean, sometimes I'm missing the drama. Like there are people that I am on good terms with. Like I still jump on the Discord every once in a while when I can. But you know me, I'm a big believer in you're allowed to complain, but you have to come up with a solution. And there are many people, particularly on my Discord, that don't like that response because they've grown up under this umbrella of the Dr. Phils of the world, where it's like I'm supposed to be emotionally vulnerable and you're supposed to just listen and hear me vent, and I'm supposed to come up with my own solutions. I'm like, there's a big difference between a psychologist that makes millions of dollars that was found guilty of sexually harassing his secretary versus someone like myself who isn't a psychologist, but I will tell you when you're screwing things up, or at least under my perception that you're screwing things up. Whether you agree with it or not is something completely different. But the element is that, unfortunately, there are figures in mainstream media, people like Dr. Phil or Dr. Oz, that portray this notion of mental health being this concept of being heard. And it's not just the concept of being heard. Like, don't get me wrong, talking about something is therapeutic. There's some value associated with it. But you also have to digest the underlying issues. And these shows, there's no way you can digest an underlying issue in under an hour. There's just no way. It takes too long. And unfortunately, it doesn't sell. So these shows project this concept of what we call toxic positivity, this concept of being constantly positive, constantly ambitious, constantly goal-oriented. Like, I can't tell you the amount of relationships I've jumped into where the woman has this concept of being heard and being dominant, and then this ideal of how the world works and how they're going to be successful. And it's not that I'm not supporting that notion of success. I am, as a partner, supposed to be supporting you, and that's what I will do. But I'll also be the first to tell you that the plans I had when I was 25 versus how I am now are completely different. It's not to say that I'm not happy with my life and the direction it's heading in, but the natural consequence of having goals is changing those goals because you're going to run into roadblocks.
Would you use the word improvise?
Improvise, I would say situational adjustment as well. People lose jobs, people lose family members, people are exposed to, a pandemic. These things happen. And it's very often that when these things happen, you hit rock bottom. You lose a part of yourself, but through the construction and the recovery of oneself, you start redefining what your character is. Too many people, and I include some coaches in this concept as well. Too many people, I don't want to use the term like Corey Wayne, but I'll use Corey Wayne because he seems to be the most popular one, has this concept of if the relationship fails, it failed because you failed to do something, which potentially could be true, or it could be that you're dealing with a broken individual. The truth is, you're not going to know which one that is until you've digested the trauma that you've gone through internally. You've healed, you've addressed some things that you weren't happy about, let be physical fitness, emotional stability, financial stability. These things naturally progress when you recover from a relationship. And it's only when you've removed yourself from that bubble, that mirage that we call emotion, can you truly look back at a relationship and say, you know what, I had some responsibility there, or some liability that I chose not to take responsibility for. Or maybe you look back on it and you say, my ex was crazy. The definition of what you conclude has to do with how you've carried yourself. And once you've removed yourself from that emotional bubble, you can actually see it with clear eyes.
Yeah, well, that's one of those cases too where there's a lot of generalizations that are answers, and that's why you need to get tailored advice, right? That's why when you do coaching, it's like, all right, my thing is, what's your story? Yours is like, talk away, let me take notes, and then let me jump in. You know what I mean? Because your individual story is so unique, and your interpretation, your perception is unique, that it doesn't always apply to one thing. Like, oh, it's always your fault, like you said. But like I like to look at it is, what you said is true. Later on, the dots aren't going to get connected fully until, down the road when everything else turns out. And then you're like, well, that breakup had to happen. Or, I actually was a lot more immature than I thought I was. Hindsight 2020, actually I did make some mistakes and I thought it was all her fault. You can go through it that way, but sometimes in real time, you're not ready for those kinds of things. But it's definitely whenever someone gets to a one size fits all answer, you got to be more masculine. It's like, that's pretty broad. You got to get on your purpose is a big one, right? It's like, well, that's pretty broad. It's pretty broad. It's like there's so much of that going around, right? And one of the ones that is big too is, for example, Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you know Ryan Holiday's the author of a bunch of different books, and he just clings to stoicism, right? Everything's stoicism. Mm-hmm. And he just...
Oh, yeah, I know him. Yep.
Right? And he's a smart guy, I guess, and he's had some success, and he's written some good, fairly good books. And he mentored under Robert Greene. He's got an interesting story. Sometimes when he's interviewed, but he just goes on and on and on about Marcus Aurelius being this, ultimate figure, and it'll be like Marcus Aurelius' second thing that he wrote in Meditations, take action. And then it's framed in this one sentence that's so simple, but because Marcus Aurelius, the leader of the free world, it's like, it's the same as if Mac McCarthy says take action, right? It's like everyone's taking someone's quote and then making bigger than it is. It's like, well, this person said this, so it carries more weight, and I'm a Stoic because of this. And then it's general information. It's generalized information where my point is if you really want to get help and move forward, I would say coach or therapist individually talk about your problems or your issues, because someone saying like read my book and take action plan number 2, or these people are smart, these people have good things, but until you really unpack what's going on with you as an individual, I think it's difficult to make it that simple for some people than to just make it a principle because Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of the Romans, did this and all. It's too easy that way, and people. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I just see like this is happening over and over again, You're quoting the same people that their thoughts are pretty simple. Like things that you would already know, but it's like, no, it's, the Roman emperor, so it's different. It's like, okay.
People have a funny way of projecting their values and beliefs in specific people, I find. Like we see this is especially, and we learn this in politics all the time. Everyone has a bias.
Sure.
We see this especially in like Adam Smith, for example, founder of capitalism. There's a concept of, invisible hand. He's a believer and proponent of free markets. But if you actually read his content, specifically when you read his second book, Theories of Moral Dissent, he was a left-wing liberal. He believed in free education, free healthcare, high government involvement. And his reasoning for it had everything to do with if you keep the best people healthy and the best people well educated, you're going to get a better society. Mm-hmm. But there's this misconstrued concept of, everything being about what he wrote about in The Wealth of Nations, which was more of an analysis on how markets should work rather than what his belief structure actually was, which is the free market is only free when the people that are the best have access to the appropriate resources. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's this concept that, depending on who you speak to, they'll quote Adam Smith in very different directions. In fact, most people, when they're quoting Adam Smith, specifically neo-capitalists or neoliberals, when they talk about the concept of the global market, aren't actually aware they're actually quoting Karl Marx in his analysis in Capital, which talked about the global market and the global bourgeoisie rising up and taking ownership at a global scale. Now, this is a little too political, but the reason I bring it up is that the same thing is true when it comes to psychological analysis. If I have this inherent belief structure, I believe that, let's just take an extreme example. I believe that as a man, you're supposed to take ownership. And the moment you show a little bit of vulnerability, I'm going to leave you because that means that you are not the man for me. And I'm going to search various gurus that support this notion in small little packets. Well, this particular psychologist says that we should be ambitious and have this drive towards the high levels of, wealth and sustainability and business etiquette. But that same psychologist, 20 pages in, also mentions the need for emotional security and stability, and that most relationships are built on this notion. But I have an inherent bias, and that bias is going to push me towards whatever belief I have. We see what we want to believe, as the saying goes. So for us, particularly in a breakup, and particularly a traumatic breakup, which I'm assuming most people on here have gone through a traumatic breakup, that's why they're on this channel, it's a big opportunity because it's going to show you the gaps in your story. You're going to start seeing where this rationality that you've portrayed on how the world works has its gaps. And you're going to start filling them with whatever rationalities you have. You're going to start seeking gurus that explain why your ex was a piece of what. But then again, you're also going to look at yourself and you're going to say, what was it I was lacking? And you're going to rationalize your concepts. And this is the beauty of hitting that rock bottom. The beauty about hitting rock bottom is the only way is back up.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why people have talked to me before and they're like, oh, after doing coaching with you, you're more of a life coach. You can talk about a lot of different things and whatnot. And I said, but to start from the point of where you're at a breakup is a really good point to start improving your life.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean by that? It's like if you came to me and you said, yeah, I want to, you're a life coach now, Mac, this and that. I want to quit smoking. I eat cookies too often. I'm a little overweight, and my girlfriend's okay, this or that. My job's okay. It's like, you come to me and you're like ground zero on a bad breakup, you're ready. You're like, I'm giving up the cookies. I think I'm going to give up the cigarettes. I want to improve my life right now. I want to get, you're at a crossroads because something happened where someone that you thought loved you, cared about you, or you figured you had a shocker pull up in your life. You had something smack you across the mouth, and it's a point in your life.
I hope you don't. I hope you're not meaning the shocker I think you mean, Mac.
I don't know. I don't have the same mind as you. You surprise me sometimes. So we use different vocabulary.
Let's put it that way.
So my point is though, it's actually the best time. It's one of the best times for you to seek life advice, actually, because you're kind of wide open, because you're like, wow, it can't get much worse, and instead of focusing on my relationship that probably in most cases, not always, but in a lot of cases was bad, and that's why you broke up. And that's what people don't see, that there was holes in that thing, that there was parts that were, whether it's your fault or their fault or both your faults, this had to happen. And then you can look at the other things, and maybe quitting smoking or starting to exercise doesn't seem like such a beast, such a hard thing to do, because you're like, well, I feel like shit about this breakup. I don't want to feel like this again. So it's actually a really good opportunity.
It really is. It really is. And again, the emphasis here is that we also don't want to burn ourselves out. Like you run into these coaches all the time where they talk about this concept of, well, you need to be getting a better job, and you need to be making more money, and you need to be physically more dominant at the gym. Look, I'm not saying these things are bad, and I'm not saying that, I'm critical of this viewpoint. Like, having a healthy body is a good thing. You only have one body in your life. You need to take care of it. But the case of, I'll throw my example in. I was in a third world country with no abilities to go outside and very little motivation to do anything else other than the coaching until I could secure a contract and come back to the States. What is the alternative there? the alternative is I continue working out each and every day. It's a fine alternative, but then I'm depressed because I'm concentrating so much of my energy both in finding work and keeping my physical fitness active when I'm already stressed with this external element, which is the pandemic, that I burn myself out. So I know my limitations well enough to know, hey, what's going to be my top priorities right now. My top priorities right now is maintaining financial stability and finding a new source of income as soon as possible. So what took the hit? Physical fitness. Now, with that being said, physical fitness is back on the bandwagon. It's starting to take a priority in my life again.
Good.
But that element of, in that particular situation, I made a choice. Now, is it a perfect choice? No, I have my regrets. At the same time, I kind of understand why I made those choices. And in that aspect, I kind of understand myself and say, okay, I made that decision. I made what I thought was the best decision at the time. Now we have to pay the consequences for those decisions.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. Yeah, and it's fine. It's one of those things. Then at that time, if someone was talking to you and you were saying like, right, I know, and you're aware of it, you're not in denial. Yeah. You're like, I know what I'm doing, and I'm putting it on the shelf for later on. But you wouldn't be saying, oh, fitness doesn't matter anyways, or this, that. You're like, no, I value it. I'm just putting it on the shelf for now because I have other things I'm valuing, and my reasons for not doing it right now are okay with me. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be honest. Like, are you just bullshitting yourself, or are you like, you're like, no, I can't get out of the house. It's okay with me. Once I get this job, I'll get back on deck. It's like, all right, and then that's fine. All right, what I want to do right now is Johanna, who's on, I believe she's still on the live stream. She sent me an email message, and I said maybe I'll just unpack this in a stream. It's kind of a frantic thing, but we'll get into it. I'll give my take, and then you can maybe chime in and say what you want to say. Clutch.
Sure.
Hold on a second. Let me just pull this up. So like I said, this wasn't written out as a story. She kind of wrote it because we've done coaching before, and I said, I'll just talk about it in a live stream. I don't think she's embarrassed about it. She said, hey, Mac, sorry to bother you. Just have to ask you about one final thing. Me and my ex broke it off forever now. So I don't know at this point how many breakups it's been, but this was a correct me if I'm wrong if you're on right now, that it was an on and off again thing. They had met online, long distance online, and was bad from the get-go. We'll just put it that way. Very bad, off and on. Lies were involved. Manipulation was involved, talking to other women, but they had never actually met in person. I caught him lying to me once again. He always came with the excuse, I lied because I knew you would go crazy and mad. He always said that last time he promised me to not lie again. I won't lie to you anymore. He had lied seeing a female friend in Vienna. He knew I don't like female friends and all that, as you may remember. The thing is, I told him, do not lie to me again. While he said to me weeks ago, we might get back together. So when someone says we might get back together and you already have decided that they're a liar of the past, probably subconsciously you don't believe them, then he knows I want no female friends near. What makes me pissed is when he plans a future with me but lies. He should have been honest. Johanna, he write, quote unquote, I will have female friends and I don't want you anymore. That's an honest answer. Then I won't get mad. But he kept me on the line saying, I'm not ready yet. I have to fix my life, but we might get back together. So right there, that statement says that you're correct. He kept you on the line. So where's your power in the situation would be my question. When someone keeps you on the line and you're aware of it, is that hindsight, or is that in the moment that you're going, yeah, this isn't right for me, I'm out? Next part, while he hung out with a female friend face-to-face 3 weeks ago alone. I asked him 5 days ago, do you see any girls face-to-face? He said no. Days ago, so right away, you're probably not going to like this, but I mean, this is a bit strict in a relationship of long distance. So this is becoming more and more apparent. I don't know about you, Clutch, but people are having long distance relationships where they never met the person in person. Long distance relationships are already difficult. Even if you've had 2 years and then you change jobs and you try to keep it going, but not seeing each other, being in different countries, different time zones. But then people will put on this thing like, all right, we're official and you can't see anyone else, and now you're saying you can't have female friends. This is not a good relationship. And if you're going to have a relationship where you're talking to someone online, and dare may I add that you do intimate things over FaceTime and that, which is very common now, people are telling me in their relationships, you're going to have less control. You're going to have less information about what they're up to on their own. And so it's going to involve a lot of trust that they're telling you the truth. Now, if you don't have any trust and you're trying to do a online thing where you haven't met before, it's gonna drive you nuts and it's gonna drive you crazy. And you got to ask yourself, do I want to be involved in this? Stop blaming them for lying. If you catch someone in a lie, what are you getting from that by staying in the relationship? Now, when you tell everyone around you, like, they lied to me, they lied to me, they lied to me, a lot of times the sad thing is people think, well, you're better off now, aren't you? They really don't. No one's gonna arrest that person. They're not going to be damned by, the world around them. You got to just move on from it. So, and the fact that I think most guys with any kind of confidence level or independence, myself included, if you told me we were starting a relationship and I couldn't talk to any females face to face or have any female friends, it would be done. I wouldn't even negotiate that. A good guy would not negotiate those kind of things. I would say I'm allowed to have female. I wouldn't even talk about it. It's way too strict. He said, no, days ago I caught him lying and found out he hung with 3 weeks ago. The thing is, he once again blames me, saying, now you maybe understand why I have to divert the truth a bit to south because I knew you would go crazy mental. But that's lying. He blames me. He can't tell me the truth because of how I react. But of course, I rage when I keep finding out the lies. So what are you getting by raging would be my question, right? This is a relationship where you rage, you get upset. Someone has told you that they lie to you because you can't handle the truth. You have demanded that they don't talk to any females in person. Don't have any female friends. You don't trust the individual. So why are you not able to completely cut them off, move on, move forward? That would be my main question. Am I wrong? Well, do you feel like you're wrong? Would be my question back to you. I would add to that, like I said, most individual men that are they would not accept these terms. They would not say that you cannot tell me I can't talk to a woman face to face. You cannot tell me that I can't have female friends. That would just not even. There would be no further relationship with me. It would be. I would actually, to be quite honest, have a little bit of a cackle. I would laugh about it. I would just be done. Please, I need your opinion. Is it an excuse to lie to someone because they know they will react badly and rage? No, I would say that there are some people out there that validate lying because someone can't handle the truth. That's absolutely true. They'll say, well, I'd rather lie to you because I'm going to get accused of it anyways. That's a big one, right? Teenagers do this with their parents. I'd rather lie to you because, you're going to get upset. You can't handle the truth. The reality is you don't trust him. You don't trust him. So even if he was to tell you the truth, you probably still wouldn't trust him. Now he's already conveyed to you numerous times that I will lie to you because you can't handle me telling you the truth. I will have female friends, even though that's something you can't handle. And so the reality is this isn't a good relationship for you. And you got to ask yourself, is this something that you're holding this guy to? Or is this something you'd hold all guys to? Not being able to talk to other women. Get mad and crazy. He makes me feel it's my fault because I get crazy when I find out he lies. And he says that he had to do it because he knew I would get super mad and lash out. That doesn't excuse it. But it also, like I said, what you're asking him to do is too much. Would guys do this? Okay, speaking for myself, which I don't speak for all men, but I'll just speak for myself. Again, I would not accept any kind of rules that said I could not talk to a woman face to face or have a female friend. That's ridiculous. because I have a bad temper maybe, but that's not an excuse to lie to me, right? It's not an excuse. It is a reason. Is it a reason I agree with? No, but it is a reason. I get mad because of the lies. I'm afraid I am the cause he has to lie, and he won't lie to his next girlfriend because she is calmer. So that's a story you created. You're not going to know what that relationship's like. You created that narrative. That was a choice. Next up, I get mad because of the lies. You're a part of this. You're allowing this. And this is, let me just state the elephant in the room. This is a long distance relationship where you still have never met in person. This is a lot of drama to be dealing with someone that you've never met in person. So what you got to do is completely disentangle yourself from this individual. Ask yourself, what kind of person do you want to see? And is it possible that the relationship would be different if it's someone you actually were able to meet in person, it wasn't online, and it wasn't in this way? Trust is one of those things in any relationship. It's hard to rebuild once it's lost. It's like, think about it this way on a minor level. If you got a colleague at work, and let's just say you're friends, your work friends, means that you don't hang out outside of work, but you're cool at work, right? You get along. They do something at work and they just flat out lie. I had this happen to me as a teacher, someone that I really didn't put a whole lot of trust. I just naturally trusted this person, and they lied to me about something that affected my schedule. And I went back to them and I'm like, hey, did you change this class? No, I didn't. Then they lied to me again. Bold-faced lie. Now, it wasn't a relationship lie, but after that, I just can't trust what they say. You just can't trust what they say because you're like, if it's a bold-faced lie to my face, however you want to validate it. When you get to a certain age in your life, kids lie. Teenagers lie a lot, right? Doesn't mean it validates. It's just they tend to be more selfish. But when someone's willing to lie and you catch them in it, it's really hard to rebuild that trust. And this guy, you can get back together, you can continue talking again, but you'll never probably trust him. And he's never going to tell you the truth because he's already told you multiple times you can't handle the truth, as the great Jack Nicholson said, right? So, Clutch, go ahead and throw in what you want to say.
Question. Does she know for sure this guy is who he says he is?
I don't remember if they had a FaceTime or not. I'm not sure. I don't remember if it was just through text. That's a good question. But they had they had met online.
Okay. Well, there's a couple things, and I think you hit some nails on the head, but I want to take it in a different direction. Okay, so they've seen themselves on FaceTime. First off, when someone tells me that they're done for good or done forever, I know it's not the case, because a person that's truly done forever doesn't need to state it. They just do it. Like, when you're mentally ready, you know you're ready. You don't come on to a coach, or you don't come to a coach like Mac or myself and ask for our opinions if it was truly done forever. But what I usually do in people in your particular situation where they're caught in a codependent dynamic, I usually tell people, write out the story very similar to what Mac asks you to write out your story, but use different names. Okay. Just because I want to disassociate the personal intention here, the personal emotional trigger that's associated with the story from the person that's coming to me for help. From the get-go, Mac is correct. Let's just give these people different names. Let's call her Mary and Michael. From the get-go, Mary and Michael were in a bad situation. It was built on a foundation of lies. It was built on a foundation of never having actually met in person. And as we talked about earlier in the show, that's a big deal, because we want to build that concept of, building intimacy. And part of intimacy, the big impact that intimacy has, is safety. It's trust. And it's quite clear that this relationship doesn't have trust. In fact, it has quite the opposite effect. It has a foundation built on manipulation. And when it comes to manipulation's an ever-growing hill. It doesn't matter how much you throw at it. it's going to constantly grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Like the words that he said, I won't lie to you anymore. Like that's not something that a logical and stable person says in any relationship because it never gets to that point. And in regards to your anger, like I've said this before, anger is a secondary emotion. So you have to pay attention to what triggers that anger. In this case, what triggers that anger can be a number of things. It could be resentment, it could be insecurity, it can be lack of trust, or resentment, or even disassociation with this person, and he claims to be. What I usually tell people: don't pay attention to their action, or don't pay attention to what they tell you. Pay attention to their actions, because their actions speak more volumes. And again, we want to disassociate your personal emotional connection with the situation. So let's say Mary comes to you and says, but he keeps telling me that he's going to change. He keeps telling me that he's not going to lie to me anymore. You know Michael is a piece of shit because he's not necessarily matching his actions with his words, let alone the fact that we want to ignore that altogether. Ignore the fact that he's constantly, lying to you and constantly making excuses. You use this concept that you yourself don't want any female friends around him because he has a tendency to fall in love with the people that are around him. Do you hear what you're saying? How is any relationship going to be built on the concept of security and trust and love if you believe truly in your emotion, in your gut, that he's going to fall for any person that comes by? Like, what's going to happen? You guys are going to retire and you're going to be 70 in a nursing home and you're going to tell the nurse to get the hell away from him? Like, is this a foundation of long-term security? It isn't. But the difference is you've been conditioned to be attracted to this type of dynamic for whatever reason, which brings up the other elephant in the room, which is, why is it that you lack so much security that you're seeking validation from this kind of person? And this can be a number of things. It could be a bad relationship. It could be the fact that this person's so manipulative. It could be the relationship that you had with mom and dad growing up. This is where, it's good to come to a coach like Mac, but it's also good to get some therapy and deal with these underlying issues. Because if you don't address these issues, the likelihood of the next relationship being similar to this one is so high, it's not even funny. It's a concept of, look, in my utter belief, my gut instinct tells me you're eventually going to leave this guy, because this kind of thinking and this kind of gaslighting that's taking place, and let's not sugarcoat it, this is gaslighting, is not sustainable. And in order for anyone to change, let alone someone in his situation or your situation, it usually takes, on average, for emotional beliefs, 1 to 2 years to change. Maybe 6 months if you really work hard at it. Like if you were dedicating yourself to self-mental improvement every single day for 10 hours a day, then you can see some improvement after 6 months. How do I know this? Because I've been that dedicated, and that's how long it took me to change some emotional beliefs I have. So emotional beliefs also include the emotional connection you have with this gentleman. So it's gonna take a while. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for you. It's going to take some time to get over this person. But the more time that you spend with them, the harder it's going to be. Like this constant barrage of building a relationship based on the tendency of this promised land is denial. And from what I see here, I see a toxic relationship that's built on the foundation of lies and manipulation. I see you partaking in situations and actions that I wouldn't consider logical. Like Max said, if I had a girlfriend that told me I couldn't see women ever again, that would be the last time I ever saw that woman. So I don't believe that you're a controlling person. What I do believe is that you have been conditioned based on the actions of this gentleman to be suspicious of any other woman that comes by, because guess what? He's not a stable person. And it's showing in you because you're connected to him. So you need to just get away from him. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Clutch. I would just say that sometimes you got to ask yourself, where's my power? And you have more power than you think. It's one of those things where sometimes you're in this situation and it's like you feel like you're in the jail cell, but you have the key in your pocket. You know this person's not treating you well. They're not honest with you. But yet you keep going back to them because this is something we talked about 3 months ago, and it was the same issue before. And so you have to come back to the fact that you're not gonna change this behavior. It's not your fault, but you need. I don't like to use the word need too much either, but reassess. Why are you staying connected to this? It's like
I'll jump in right now, man. No, she needs to get away from him.
Yeah.
Like, just like, I normally don't need to be absolute there, but this is an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
So you have to get away from it. There's no question.
Well, your situation. Well, I agree, but you have to word it to yourself in a way that's this is what I believe, Clutch. Sometimes I believe that the wording that you give yourself, sometimes, like I said, whether it's reassess, whether it's need, we've gone through this before because I've talked to her before. We've done it in a few different ways, but you need to reassess. Why are you connected to this still? What are you getting from it, right? So, because before it's a frantic, look at this guy, look what he's done wrong to me. Look what an asshole he is. Look what a liar he is. And I'm saying that most people from the outside in, a lot of times, they're not going to take your side. They're going to say, why are you sticking around? That's the better question to ask. And there's something that's keeping you connected to this drama that you're unaware of. But at any given moment, you do have the keys to get out of this. You can, and I told you before, you need to stay off social media with him because it triggers you. You need to stop playing the video game that you guys met on, I think. And I mean, so there's a lot to that. I stay connected because I love him and I'm afraid it was my fault. So this is where, okay, so that's a direct answer. Okay, so you also write, thanks guys. It's just a panic for me knowing that he lies because I get mad. I think what Clutch said is true. You're going to have to seek, whether it's talking to me again or a therapist locally where you're at, and get a little deeper on you. Okay. And you think what you're saying is like, no, he's the problem. He's the problem. I'm going to say this with kindness. You're the problem too, because you're allowing this to continue. But I'll tell you this, you coming to me, you putting yourself out there, and I believe you're in your early 20s, right, Johanna? 20, 21? I mean, you're still young, and relationships are still new to you. This is a time to learn from this, but this is not something that he's the bad guy, he's the bad guy, he's the bad guy, look what he did, I love him. You got to figure out, wait a minute, what's my role in this? You got a role in this. And somewhere in your past, whether that's through your parents' experience or something you've learned in the past, is a root to this. Because you don't want to get into relationships like this again, and you definitely don't want to continue this one. And once you figure out that root of where it's coming from, then you could maybe pull it out and move forward. But the idea of telling people, because when I read that story, the amount of times you called him a liar, I don't know, 7 times, 8 times, it doesn't make people from the outside go, oh my God, this guy's horrible. It makes everyone go, well, why are you with him? And you should be asking yourself the same question, hon. Why am I with him? And you don't have to be harsh to yourself in that answer. Like, what am I getting from this? What am I really getting from this? Because this guy's not going to change. The fact that you love him doesn't change the dynamic. The fact that you care about him doesn't change the dynamic. The idea that you're panicking and you're worried, there's something there. That's not something I believe you were born with. Something in your past life experiences, when I say past life, I mean this life, but past experiences during this life, have triggered something here. And a good therapist or a coach or what have you could maybe help you find what that is. But you're not going to find your answer in dealing with him again. If you keep dealing with him, it's going to be like a dog chasing its tail. You're going to get the same result, because this guy doesn't really care. And he doesn't love you. And the way he's doing things right now, it's extremely casual and playful. And it's not serious to him, and it's serious to you. And you need to figure out why it's okay for you to keep going back to this. Okay, so I hope that helps you. And like I said, Oh, you're right. Of course, I allow it to continue because he claims he has to do it. No. Again, I never called him a liar. I said he lied to not get me mad. Okay, you got me. He's not a liar, but he lied. I'm afraid he will change for his calmer new girlfriend, Mac. That's just an assumption, and that's something that you've created yourself. That's like me. I could create a narrative and anything I want. I mean, that's a story. You're trying to play psychic, and you're trying to say that you're basically not as good as this new girlfriend. So that I would bet to say there's something in you that feels like you're not enough in this situation. And the reality is this is just not a good relationship. Period. And there's some reason that you're allowing it to continue again and again. Well, getting mad because someone lies over and over isn't crazy. LOL. What you don't let me just say this one more time for the guys in the cheap seats, okay? What you don't realize is you're allowing yourself to be lied to over and over again. You feel like you are the innocent victim of these lies, as if it's almost like this. Let's say that you get robbed and someone steals your purse, your wallet, your money, your debit cards, everything, right? This is a pretty traumatic experience. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's pretty bad, right? Anyone, man or woman, would be like, wow, right? And you were walking down an alley at midnight. It was late. It was a bad area. You knew it was a bad area. Friends of you have told you before, hey, be careful in that area because, people get robbed over there. But you walked there anyways, and you did it anyways. You got your bag stolen. And then you go, I can't believe I got my bag stolen. Someone goes, well, you probably shouldn't have been over there at 12 o'clock midnight walking in that area. That area is known to get robbed. And then guess what? You do it again the next week. And you tell your friends, oh my God, I got robbed again. Holy shit. I got robbed again. Your friends are like, why'd you do that again? Why? Well, the guy robbed me. The guy had me. Why did you walk down that alley again? You know that's a bad area. You already had it happen to you once. And then you go, yeah, I know, but they robbed me. Yeah, but you walked down the alley at 12 o'clock where you shouldn't go. And then you do it again. And you tell your friends, oh my God, I got robbed. Take a different route. Right? Take a different route. Try a new route. Why would you go down that? This is what you're doing again. Well, he lied to me again. You're giving him the opportunity every time you re-enter talks with this individual. Does that make sense? I mean, that's a different way to look at it. But you're looking at it like, oh, I got robbed again. No, I got lied to again. It's going to happen again and again. And it's not just his fault. You're allowing it to happen. And you got to figure out why that's okay with you. And you're like, no, I'm angry about it. Why do you think that being angry and being with someone that's not trustworthy is okay? It's not.
Joanna, I'm just going to jump in here. There's going to come a point. It might not be tomorrow. It might not even be in a couple months from now. But there will be a point where you will be glad this experience happened to you. Because what you're about to go through is going to be completely enlightening as far as your understanding of what your limitations are, what you're building, what kind of character you want to be, what kind of person you want to be with. Part of that aspect of discovering ourselves has to come from a place of pain. Because what pain offers us is it offers us an ability to look at the outside world. It offers us an ability to look at, the people that we have in our lives and the way they treat us. Like I said at the very beginning, I suspect, and I can't say this for sure without speaking to you directly, but I do recommend that you reach out to Mac. I suspect there's probably something in your childhood that's triggering this kind of acceptance. And unfortunately, it's not going to be something that's going to come to you right away. It's going to be something that comes to you gradually through many coaching or therapy sessions where you start talking about what it is in your life that causes you to be attracted to this kind of person. And like most things in life, and I think you're seeing it right now with the comment section that's happening here, there are going to be good and bad people in your life. And the bad people tend to stand out like a sore thumb. When you're caught in a situation where you're in a relationship where you're with someone who is bad for you and you've been conditioned, this is not a question of whether or not you have boundaries or not. You've been conditioned to think that this is the way love is expressed. Love is expressed through controlling, narcissistic behavior. This is something that you need to internalize and you need to address, because if you don't, even if you find someone who's stable and secure, the relationship's not going to last, because these insecurities that have sparked from this relationship are going to start showing themselves. I've been in that situation. I've gone through that situation where you find someone who's good and you end up self-sabotaging because you think they're going to be just as bad as this gentleman that you're seeing right now. And I will tell you that relationships, any relationships that don't have trust, are bound to self-destruct. With that said, like I said, with this destruction that's about to come, you will build something special. You will build something that you're proud of. But first, the very first step is recognizing there's a problem, which you've done to your credit. Now, the second step is to actually execute the solution, which is going to take some time.
Yeah, and just realize that it's not going to come from. It's very surface based to go, this guy's a liar. Look what he did to me. It's unfair. The question you got to reach for deep down: why am I going back? Why is this a continued problem for me? Why can't I just disregard this guy as a liar and be done with them? And you might say, well, because I love him. Then you got to dissect, whether that's with me or a therapist or someone down the road. Well, what's my definition of love? Because maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's not your fault, but maybe that's where you're wrong. But what you're filtering for. And so like what Clutch just said, though, this is a turning point. This isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing to find out early. And I'll give you credit right now. Sending your story, being on a live stream, you're being quite vulnerable, right? And it's not, there's always going to be people with opinions or this or that. But the reality is at the core of this right now is you got to redefine what it is that love is to you and what you accept in a relationship in the future. And this right now is not, quote unquote, a good guy, and this is not a good relationship. And you gotta find out why am I still connected to this? And it's gonna probably take some digging from a therapist. And like Clutch said, it takes time. It takes time. And whatever route you end up doing that, it's gonna be a positive thing. But don't think that on the surface, this is a bad guy, everyone should be on my side. Of course, I don't like liars. I don't like jerks. I don't like assholes, narcissists, whatever. I don't like all these types of people. I don't like what you're saying is happening. But at a certain level, I also am like, so at what point are you going to say, yeah, this has happened to me 5, 6, 7 times. And this guy's not changing, but why am I accepting it? That's the question you got to come back to, and you might be surprised. And maybe you don't want to answer that right now, but it's got to be the one. So I think that's that. And I want to say that, like I said, thanks for sharing, because this is a start. This is a start. Like, you know that there's a problem here. You know there's a problem. Let me check on the live stream here.
You have quite the troll on your live stream, actually.
What's that? Oh,
you have
really?
quite the troll on your live stream.
I'm lucky. I don't have too many usually.
Well, at the end of the day, like, they're a dime a dozen, right? But like, what I don't like about this guy is he's like, laugh or criticizing someone who's being vulnerable. It's like, you don't do that. Like,
I didn't see it. I didn't see what was said. Okay, Rob says he fell in love with his female friend because he was attracted, or maybe that scale of attraction tipped more in her favor than others. Do you know if the friend fell in love with him as well? What I would say to that, Rob, is you don't want to. I mean, if someone's lying to you and it's a bad relationship, you don't even want to know that stuff. I don't even think you want to take it there.
The concept is, and guys, I know you're trying to help, but this is someone who, I'm going to be very direct, Joanna. You're trying to hold on to the relationship as much as possible, and the only way you know how to is to repeat the story over and over and over. You're caught in what we call a spiral. And I know people have good intentions, in giving advice, but the best thing that you can do right now is to get away from this person.
Yep.
And part of that is accepting that the element of you building something is going to take some sacrifice, some personal sacrifices initially at the very beginning. It's going to feel wrong in many aspects of the word, but it's like weaning yourself off a drug. At first, you're going to go through the withdrawal systems, and quite frankly, it is a drug you're getting off of. You're getting off of dopamine. You're getting off of these chemicals that make you feel really good. But eventually, as you transition to everything, you're going to start feeling better. But it's going to take some time to go through that withdrawal.
Yeah, it takes some pain. So it's like when people come to me with breakups, a lot of times one of the things I'll say repeatedly is that, you're going to have to lay off your heart for a little while. You're going to have to hurt for a little while to get through it. And that's okay. Right? A lot of people use maybe drugs and alcohol, maybe, hook up with randoms here and there. There's all kinds of different things you can do to make yourself feel better in a moment. But sometimes it's going to take some time. But one thing that you need to do is assess what was your role and why are you accepting it again and again too. And that's where your growth's going to come in this situation. So we got Nav on here. I deleted it and told him I was over him because he lied to them. Okay. What are we about? Hour and 45 minutes in. The start of this show was I want to break up. We just don't have sex anymore. Derek D, Rob IS, Nav, any of you had this experience before where you were in a relationship? We'll just put it on the live stream right now. If you were in a relationship and you wanted to break up because the intimacy just fell off, or you had second thoughts like it should be more than it is. I think that's an interesting question. I would ask Clutch, since you've had some experience, has this come up in your relationships before where you were like, this is a problem? Directly.
Can you repeat the question? I missed the first half.
No worries. Directly. So just like the topic of the thing, have you had a relationship in the past that was, let's just say, long-term in the sense over a couple years or a year and a half where we just stopped having sex or intimacy went down, and what did you do? Did you break up immediately? Did you have a talk, or did you treat that differently based on where you were at in life?
I've had my cold streaks or my dry spells. So a few long-term relationships where, you didn't have sex for like a month or something like that.
Yeah.
That's definitely happened. And it's normal to happen. People go through stressful times. They go through blocks in relationships where, it lacks intimacy. In order to rebuild that back, I think we kind of covered the main points. Being emotionally vulnerable, building an emotional connection, building an element of safety. These are all good things. But the other element as well is that, look, some of the situations are built on the concept of truly understanding one's vulnerabilities in oneself. What people usually do in relationships or even in regular social dynamics is they tend to either project or they tend to bully. So whenever we find ourselves in situations where we're not getting that level of intimacy, the immediate reaction that most people go through, particularly men, is they project this insecurity on something else. So that element of projection usually comes in the form of criticism. You're not giving me enough intimacy. You're not allowing me to feel the touch of a woman. You're not allowing me to be this or be that, whatever it may be. That element is going to be something where eventually it's going to cause you to become isolated. And that usually results in the demise of the relationship. The important thing is, guys, that when you find yourself in this situation, and sometimes, and I'll just be frank, sometimes you just deal with jerks. Sometimes you just are dealing with someone who doesn't have your best intentions in mind. I think Joanna's situation is a perfect example of this. We have to cut our losses at some point. There have been situations where I've cut my loss, not because of lack of intimacy, but other things as well. I can get past the intimacy, even though it's the number one on my list. I can get to a situation where I truly understand, look, I've tried and exhausted everything I possibly can. And unfortunately, this is a situation where I can't really recover from this kind of situation. I can't really build something off of it. And this is the sad truth of most relationships. They're bound to end. So understand that just because, you're in an intimate, deep connection doesn't mean this is meant to last. Take it as a learning experience, not to sound dismissive, but understand that the majority of relationships you find yourselves in are going to fail. Doesn't mean that this one is going to fail, but just understand that that's the reality of those situations. So when you find yourself in a sexless relationship or a sexless marriage, and it's been many months or many years, and there's no recovery, and you've exhausted all means, whether that be group therapy or directly trying to compromise or trying to build a safety or emotional intimacy, sometimes the best thing to do is to end it. But obviously, my personal opinion, you shouldn't get to that level until you've truly exhausted all the other means.
Yeah, I would say that in thinking back in my own relationships, yeah, you get in those modes. But I remember, your girlfriend will tell you about her friends' relationships from time to time, or a good friend, right? And I remember her being like, one of her good friends. This is a relationship from years back, and they were together longer than us. They were together like 5 or 6 years, and they had some ups and downs. I think her boyfriend had been on drugs, but he came out of it. They trials and tribulations, and stayed together, and they were by all means a pretty good couple, by the outside. Sometimes people just assume everything, you know what I mean, Clutch? Like,
yeah.
A lot of people do this too. They'll be like, oh, I thought, Karen and John were so good together, and then like they're done in a day, and you're like, what? Like a divorce or something like that. So some people hide things well, but they weren't close friends to mine. But I just, like there's some of your girlfriend's friends, and I always get along with, when I've had girlfriends' friends, I get along with people pretty well overall anyway. So I've never had a big issue with a friend, maybe once or twice, but they usually have to be, pieces of work where they just create shit. And I'll just be like, I don't want to be around her. But overall, this was one of those friends. I really liked her. Her boyfriend was a nice guy and everything like that. And she was like, yeah, she said that they don't have sex for months. I'm like, excuse me? I was like, wow, like we're in our 20s at this, like mid 20s. And she was like, yeah, and I'm just like, in my head, like, well, that'll never happen with us, hon. I mean, in my head, like, don't get any ideas here that's okay. But it was just, that was the first time I had heard something like that with a couple that had been together for a while, and they seemed all right. I mean, I can't gauge what they're, it's not like they were all over each other when we'd go out to dinner, but I just was shocked. I was like, what? Are you serious? But I've certainly been in relationships where I've been in a long relationship where it tapers off. But I've never been where like you just go like 2 months or 3 months, where it's tapered off to like once a week or something like that. And it's kind of funny because I remember I've had conversations where it goes to once a week with a buddy or two or something like that. And one buddy will be like, what? Once a week? I'm 2 to 3 times a week. Really? And then the other buddy will just be silent. And you're like, oh shit. Yes.
We just we hit a nerve here.
Yeah, I was just like, oh shit. Like he won't, like someone else will say what they had, and it'll just be like, he'll just be quiet, take a sip of his beer or something. And it's like, yeah, it's like, okay. I guess it's not even once a month or something. It just dropped the subject. You're just like, okay, that was a painful one to bring up. So you always think that, one thing though that I would say too is that if you're okay with maybe once a week or once every 10 days or something like that, I have read before that like, that's not so bad if it's good, right? If it's good once a week, if that's your schedule or if you have kids or you have that. I think when you get into a mode where you're like, I think the part that gets tough, and this client that I had recently, and I've had other clients, is the question I ask, did you just stop trying? That's a really good question to ask when you're just, especially guys, because you want to. Like, right? It's like, there's no like, it's like, there's times and it's like, they'll go, yeah. And I'm like, you've been rejected. Yeah, she rejected me like the last 3 or 4 times. She told me she just doesn't have the same. And I'm like, so now you don't even want to try. And that's tough. When you get to a point where you don't want to initiate things, or you feel like you're going to be automatically rejected, or you go into it with, a half-ass effort because you're scared of, her saying no or this or that, that's when I think it gets bad, because that's hard to revive sometimes. That's something that you feel like it's just never coming back. And the other part I would add is when, and in this particular case, when the woman has built a case of why it's okay. In other words, my friends are like this. This is part of menopause. You know, I'm not in menopause yet, but this is what happens when you get a little bit older. I've had clients tell me that before, that, you know, she said because she's a little old, you know, she's building the case, building up a wall instead of going, well, maybe we should try some things. Well, maybe it's me, maybe it's that. And that's usually the beginning of the end. And you have a choice if you want to accept that or not. There's plenty of guys out there that go, oh, that's just how marriage is. The honeymoon phase happens, and then it just makes me cringe because I'm like, no, that's what you accept, dude. It's like,
you know what expression makes me cringe more than anything? Happy wife, happy life.
Ah,
I'm just like, yeah.
I got a buddy like that.
Yeah, it's not saying it's not saying that you both can't be happy, but like if your whole purpose is to keep her emotionally happy at the expense of your emotional stability, or even like, you know, your dignity, it's like, no, dude. Like there's one thing that will make you the least attractive you could possibly be, and that's to be a pushover.
I was just gonna say, don't stand up for yourself. Don't be okay with stuff you're not okay with. You need to draw a line. You need to draw a line in what's not. Everyone has a line too, and there's some stuff guys will be like, I just don't even care about that. See, if you sincerely don't, right? You could. It's like people are shocked by certain things people accept. It's up to them, right? Someone say I caught my wife cheating. She apologized for it. I'm okay with it. That's on them. That's on them. That's on them to work that out and figure it out. It's probably going to be hard. It's probably going to bubble back up. But is it possible to get through that? Sure. But the reality is if you're not okay with it and you're like, yeah, I'm okay with it, I'm cool with it. No, they sense that shit too. They will sense that you're just being a little pussy willow and you're just going with the flow. It's a turnoff. But that happy wife, happy life, I've heard that, and I was like, what? That's how you validate being the way you are? Like, and that kind of motto, that kind of narrative or words to live by, because I've heard it used more than once. I'm just like, oh, dude, so you're just saying like, this is the way marriage is. And I'm like, geez, man. Like, at some point you have to stand up for yourself when shit's not right. But the problem, I think, with that, Clutch, I think that's when if there's kids involved and there's finances involved, guys just don't want to address the consequence of maybe losing a large amount of money or paying or losing maybe visitation rights to their kids, stuff like that I've never faced in a relationship because I've never been married with kids. And I think they just go, the consequences are too high to rock the boat. And that's tough. Because I can't say, you haven't been in that situation either. And so like you, I hear it and I cringe. And, you know, I didn't grow up that way. My father wasn't that way at all. So it's one of those things, though. I think that's what breeds it sometimes, is the guy goes, well, the consequences are so high that I have to be that way. I have to be that way. And that, when you hear it, you're like, makes me not want to get married, man. it's like have you ever had friends, Clutch, too, that are like, when are you going to get married, man? Why? Because you did?
Oh, God. I've had friends asking me, well, when am I going to have kids, let alone like get married? And I'm just like, I don't know. I usually tell them I don't really want kids anymore. And people kind of freeze and they're like, what? But it is funny because I remember, I'm going to get nostalgic. In my first year of university, we had university residence, and the university residence that we had was two sets of bedrooms that shared a bathroom, and there were 4 guys, and we ended up getting a house later on in the following year. And out of all those guys, I was the one that wanted marriage. I wanted children. And, you know, here we are, fast forward like 15, 16 years later. All of them are married with kids, and I moved to California, and I'm, you know, living my life. And they're just like, wow, like complete 180 from what your value system was back then to what it is now. I'm like, yeah, you know, props to you. You guys got married. You have children. You know, they're happy doing what they're doing, but people change. You know, it takes a while.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you're allowed to change, right? It's like when you talk about these self-improvement things, like have your purpose, have these things. I get it, but you're allowed to change that too. It's like being a teacher at the university level for a while. I'd ask, kids 19, 20, 21. I ask that question a lot. What do you want to do? I don't know yet. It's okay to pick something now, just to have something. What would you do if you could do anything? What would, put money aside? It's a question I'd ask a lot, because I think that you should entertain it when you're young. Doesn't mean you need to be married to it, but you should have an idea. Otherwise, you're going to be working at 7-Eleven. You should have something. You should have something, and it's okay. It's okay to be something big. It's like when I was in college, my thing was I wanted to be a professor, and I wanted to teach the history of American sports. And I took this baseball history class. I love sports since I was a little kid, and I had this thing. Never followed through with it completely, but it was something nice. It was better than saying I don't know. You know what I mean? You're allowed to change it over that time, but it's nice to have some of those things up, and then maybe you reshape it to teaching in Thailand at a university near a beach, but you won't be able to teach the history of sports, right? So you should have that off and on, and being able to reshape it or improvise, it's actually a good thing. And maybe you change your mind again, Clutch.
Maybe. Well, want
Right?
to know what the secret is, Mac?
What?
Secret is when people go through these changes, that's when they actually get the X back. Be like, Clutch, I reconnected with my ex from 10 years ago. I'm like, yep. I've heard that story many times. I'm sure you have as well, Mac.
10 years? I don't hear that one as often. 10 years, it's usually not that long before. I don't know.
Well, you get the idea. 5 to 10 years usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean when someone's changed who they are or what they're searching for?
What they're searching for, and then all of a sudden they just happen to bump into their ex, and they're two completely separate people. They've matured, they've reflected, and they've internalized the lessons of why the relationship failed the first time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, by then they're usually going through some kind of midlife crisis. So what better way to deal with a midlife crisis than to date someone that knew you from your younger days, right?
Yeah, familiarity is attractive. It's a thing that a lot of people are trying. And a lot of books that talk about influence, and I talked about the book The Like Switch, which is an interesting book about, I think he's an FBI agent or CIA or something, but he talks about different things, and just whoever they were marking as someone that's a potential, what do I call it? Not a spy, but like a double agent. Just being familiar in their viewpoint was one of their techniques to make someone comfortable with you, seeing them every day at the grocery store. Seeing them, familiarity is big. So that's why people are, if they do cross paths again, there is always a chance compared to a random at the grocery store, right?
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean? And, when you talk to people, and you talk to people, I talk to people, and you hear their story, you can kind of go, you know what? You were a pretty good boyfriend. You were a pretty good girlfriend. There is a chance of down the road. Don't say never. But it's not going to happen anytime soon, because the smoke's got to clear, and you got your things or this or that. But if you were pretty good overall, and if you were, you know what I mean? Like, that we were pretty good, not perfect, or the last couple months were maybe bad or something like that. But overall, if you guys do run into each other again, good relationships aren't as plentiful as you think. It's meeting people. Having intimacy or things like that are much more plentiful. But meeting someone that you can connect with for a few years, 3 or 4 years, even if it doesn't work out, it's still special. I'm talking about a good relationship.
Dude, that was one of the lines I used to run on my pickup days.
What's that? What's that?
Oh, it's just like you go up to a set of women and you're just like, tell me about you. Like, you're very attractive, but beauty's common. Like, tell me about what your goals are, your ambitions, because sexual attraction is one thing or another, but like building connection, building a long foundation, like building trust with people, that's rare. Tell me about yourself. It's a good opener.
And they would eat that.
They would eat that shit up like no tomorrow.
In California, right? In Southern California.
Well, this was back in Canada. I have not tried these techniques out here.
All right, what would be really interesting about some of these things is,
what's that?
Obviously, they're not always going to work, right? But it's just so funny in the back of my head, which is fine. But in the back of my head, I have a client that's from New York, from Queens. She's cool. She's in her early 30s. She's tough, independent, right? And some of the things she tells me sometimes, and I was joking around because she was saying that she's, over the years come to me off and on for, different problems with the relationship. At first it was a breakup. And so, surprise, surprise, sometimes she swears, New Yorker. And she was like, I was like, something about life coach. She's like, I tell everyone at work about you being a life coach and how good you are and this and that. And I'm like, I'm sure it goes over big in New York having a life coach. Because I said it just doesn't seem to be as popular as it would in like Southern California, right? Like there's more coaches in that element there. And I was like, so I was saying to her about, the coaches that were like, just have an awesome day. Just have yourself an awesome day. And have some, like they use these terms and different things online. And she's like, we don't even use the word awesome in New York. she's like, yeah, we don't even use that fucking word. I was like, I bet you don't. And where
That's
I'm
true.
going,
I've never heard a New Yorker use the word awesome.
Yeah,
You're right.
Right. So like that's what I talk about. Environments count when you're single. When you move somewhere new, you've moved a few different places. It's different. It's a different, environments count. It's like I talk about, if you're going to go fishing and you want to go salmon fishing, you go to Alaska, you're like, oh my God, I caught 50 salmon a day and all this stuff. There's places in the world like that for, men and women that are singles. Now going back to this woman though, the funny thing is when you told me that line, I was like, I'd love to hear you go in New York City with that line. Because I could just see, who the fuck you talking to? And it's like, what?
See a bunch of people get triggered over something.
It would just be funny because I would like to see how different people, how different people would react to that in different areas, right? Because it would matter. It would matter. It would be funny. That is.
Oh man, that's too funny.
She would definitely be like, "What? What'd you say?" It wouldn't go over that big like it would. I could see it totally going big in San Diego or Southern California. Like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to be a yoga instructor, and I practiced meditation, these kinds of things. Different places, different faces.
Honestly, like some breakups I've had have been some of the best eye openers / opportunities I've ever had.
Oh yeah.
So it's funny how it works. It's like even like, going back to the subject, like a sexist relationship that results in a breakup or a divorce. Like some of my breakups have resulted in me moving to another country or me moving to a brand new city or me taking up a hobby I never thought I would take up. Or, even in the workplace, like me having a fallout with my boss resulted in me applying for some random job out of spite and getting that job and being involved in an industry that I never would have imagined I would have been involved in. So it's funny how these things work and how they pan out. And sometimes you look back on it with a little chuckle and you remember, you know what? The sexist relationship that I had was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because it forced me to start addressing some other issues.
Yeah. And down the road, speaking of that, when you look at your exes too, it's like, I don't do it often, but I don't look at it like, oh, we could have been together 20, 25 years or something like that. You kind of like, you get to a point usually where you're like, yeah, it's okay. And then you can see like, because if some people look at it like, oh, it would have been all great. No, it wouldn't have probably. you would have to go through some shit. Any long distance relationship does. So let me just see what Nav put here. Men usually say happy wife, happy life when they don't want to argue, talk, or communicate issues in the relationship that the wife may want to discuss. So they just basically give up and keep quiet. I would say that's true because sometimes guys don't want to have petty arguments and it's just not that important. But like I said, I think with some guys that are married, the consequences are really high. And there's some women that'll go kneecaps and go, well, you want to get a divorce then?
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? That's neat. It's like, and the guy's like, I don't want to sell the house. I don't want to give you, that's not everywhere, but like, that's what's going through his head. And the woman's like, you want to just get a divorce then?
Well, in some other cases the woman's just mean. So, like I can't say I've been caught in this situation, but I've heard situations where like, they'll get into an argument. It's like, what your problem is? You're just like your father. Oof.
Yeah.
Like those hurt. But, sometimes the happy wife, happy life comes from people because like the wife's a bully. Like, I'm not saying it's in every situation. Like, there's different circumstances, different situations. But yeah, in some cases, you're right. The guy's a pushover, or the guy just doesn't want to argue. In other cases, look, they're married to or dealing with a bully.
Yeah.
And they just have to put up the peace or find a foundation of peace, whatever that is. People rationalize and justify whatever it is that, they're going through, however they want to go through it. Like, we could enter a debate and, we walk away and both of us think we won that debate. At the end of the day, what difference is it going to make? You're going to live your life however you've rationalized it to be. Usually what causes changes in rationalization and the way you view the world, and we see this all the time on YouTube, is hitting that rock bottom, hitting that breakup, being like, oh, wow, I understand why she said this about me, or why he said this about me. I understand why she or he didn't want to have sex with me anymore.
Right.
And then you slowly start building yourself up and start addressing it, because it's a case of, look, and I'm sure everyone's guilty of doing this. I've creeped my exes, and out of all of them, I like to say I'm doing much better. Not saying that you should compare yourself to someone else, but looking back on it, some of the breakups I've gone through, both as a dumpy and the dumper, it ended up for the best. So I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, I always say get an equal or higher match, not just someone that's better, because that's opinion, right? Someone else will go, oh, yeah. Someone was just telling me last week, that a couple of my friends were like, a lot of your girlfriends are prettier. I'm like, so says them. Are you attracted to her? I mean, that's the thing about attraction. When you get older, you're like, you might like something that other guys don't like. It's like, I've had friends that think they're with the hottest woman in the world, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not attracted to her at all. You know what I mean? It's like, so what? Now, to me, that's not a real, like, when you get to a certain age, I wouldn't plant that seed with a friend. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say that to my friend, like, oh, she's pretty ugly, bro. You've been with better. You know what I mean? It wouldn't come up.
If you've been with someone, let's say for a few years, and the only thing that you can say out of that relationship is that they're attractive, like, come on. Like, it's a case of, like, well, maybe she's a bitch. Does that bitchiness, or does that attraction make up for the bitchiness? Maybe in some cases, maybe some, and yeah, that's enough. That's sufficient. But that beauty ain't gonna last forever. And when it fades, you're going to only be left with what's underneath. Is that someone you want to stick with?
Wow.
Like, that's a tough pill to swallow, right?
Yeah, that's long-term thinking, huh?
Yeah. Like, not to burst any bubbles, but, like, honestly, if you're with a bitch, guess what you're going to be with after that beauty fades? A bitch.
Yeah.
Or a dick, in the case of men.
Yeah. Or, yeah, that's right. That's right. In a lot of cases, it's not going to change. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. It's definitely going to get worse over the years, for sure.
Well, we talked about this. Most people turn into their parents.
I was thinking that in my head when you said that, because I've had a couple of girlfriends where I just disregarded that because I wasn't into psychology or those things, or, like, you kind of hear that or whatever. And you're like, yeah, okay, you just brush it off, but you don't realize how true it is. If the person, and even if the person, by the way, I would say that let's say you meet them and you're 35 and 35 years old, whatever, 30, you know what I mean? And you're like, their parents live somewhere else. They're not connected to their parents, but you know that their parents were rough on them. And I'll just give the classic, the mom hates the dad now, and something else, and the mom's always upset about something. And you don't see it in your girlfriend at first. You see maybe like spots of it, but then when you get together longer, like her parents were, you're like, holy shit. You're turning
She starts off as the victim. I've seen that so many times.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh shit, it took a few years. It took a few years to get to that where you're being like your mom. And you don't even know it. Like, in so many ways. And you're like, oh my. But in the beginning, it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. And so I think that can matriculate a lot of times, that you don't know that right away. So that's a big one. The parents and family count for sure, man. Big time.
Well, when you're in the honeymoon phase and you're having sex every day, and then all of a sudden the sex slows down, and you're just like, ugh.
Gets
real.
Do
you ever see Eddie Murphy Raw, where he talks about the cracker?
You've said that before, yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot what you said about it though, but I've heard you say that before. I've seen Eddie Murphy Raw, but it was in the 80s. So I mean, I think I've seen it in the 90s, right?
Yeah, like the whole concept is he's just like when you get to with a woman and she makes you wait for sex, and you date her for 3 months and you have sex and it's the best sex you've ever had in your life, and you're like, yes, this is the sex I've been looking for, and you marry this woman. It's like, but it's not the best sex anymore. You know why it felt really good? Because you waited 6 months for it.
Yeah, I always say water tastes really good when you're in the desert for a couple of weeks, dude. It's like it's the same kind of thing. I was saying this a couple of days ago on the live stream. There's a book by I think his name's Robert Soplowski. He's a Stanford professor of behaviorism and all this other stuff. But he has a book called I think it's called Behavior, and basically he said that the dopamine that a human being would get as hunters and gatherers when they would find one berry, right? They'd get, like I found my berry, or I got my hunt and got my food or whatever. He goes, but if you go 5 days to a week without that berry or that food, it's 4 times the dopamine. I was like, that's interesting. That's interesting. That makes sense. Would explain a fair bit. Yeah, no, it makes total sense, but it would explain a lot of the relationships I've been in. Right? That goes back to when not talking or not being around, missing someone, being neglected in some way, in some way in your life or something like that. It's like people that value money a lot, I've noticed. They were poor when they were young. That's what drives them to be, billionaires rather than just a millionaire. So that was interesting. I heard that recently in a documentary. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, huh? Doesn't it? It applies to a lot of things, including food, right? You had your favorite food you haven't eaten in a long time. When I did my detox for 3 weeks, I was like dreaming of tacos. I was dreaming, literally. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I was like, pancakes with butter and syrup. I don't even eat pancakes that often in Thailand. I was like, where's this coming from? It's like you get off your detox of just eating vegetables and all this stuff, and it's like, it would be like, oh my goodness, this is so wonderful. Hence why the woman wants you to wait.
Well, I usually found that the people that make you wait tend to have the longest relationship. So that Eddie Murphy bit always made me laugh. Yeah. Just because, like, his whole concept is if you were starving and someone gave you a cracker, you'd be like, this is the best cracker ever.
It is. It's true. Yeah, it's true. It is true, though, right? Because it's like I said, when I had that detox, I was like, went to this coffee shop. I'm like, another croissant. And the lady's like, you've had 3, they're good, huh? And I'm like, they could have dog shit smeared on them. I'd eat them probably, huh? I've just been eating vegetables.
Oh man, I'm about to enter my my fitness regimen, and like part of the diet I'm going on is I can only eat something if it eats, swims, or flies. And as far as like my other intake, like my carbs is strictly green vegetables, and that's it. It's going to be an
swims,
intense,
or fly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Intense diet regimen, along with, workout 6 days a week.
6 days a week?
That's usually what I do, yeah.
Weight training, or what are you doing?
Mixture of weight training and cardio. To start, I'll probably ease up on it. Usually I'll start off by doing half an hour of weights and 10 minutes of cardio, but then as I start progressing more and more, it will turn into an hour.
Okay. You do it on your own, or you get a trainer?
I do it on my own. In fact, I'm more productive going to the gym alone. Like, my girlfriend is visiting right now, and she's about to go back to Chile next week. And she said, why don't you go to the gym with me? I'm like, no, I need you gone. Because, like, I need to get into the zone for this regiment, and this is going to include 5 a.m. wake-ups. It's going to include me being in the zone. Like, I'd rather do it on my own.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to go with my girlfriend to the gym. That's not my thing, yeah. All right, this has been good, bud. Good to catch up. Haven't heard from you for a while, and I'm glad you're doing well. I hope eventually you can get back into the coaching ring because they want you. They're calling for you.
Well, one of them isn't. It's okay. I don't take it personally.
Rob, thanks for joining today. Petty Betty, thanks for joining today. Nav, it's always a pleasure. Double D, Sabina, it was fun. We had just a few people on early, but who cares? It was fun to chat.
Sabina is becoming really active on my Discord. She calls me mean, like, on a daily basis. She doesn't like my sense of humor.
Oh, okay. Well, it's not for everyone. I mean, since sense of humor is like a fingerprint, huh?
Well, yeah. It's like either they like it or, you're you're wanted for murder.
You know, it's funny about that. We're talking about living in different areas. We have that in common, that you've, lived in a few places. So it's like, it's different because when you interact with a whole new group of people, let alone a culture, your core group of friends was different. So like your sense of humor, your jokes, or things like that. So it's kind of funny. Like when I go back with my high school, but totally different sense of humor than I would have with people I just met over here or something like that, right? It's not for everyone. It's like the things we talk about are much different. It's like, so you get these different groups of people and everyone has their own limitations on humor, especially now these days. But if it's your Discord and your channel, then you go, well, that's why it's my Discord.
I've had to have that conversation many times with people where it's just not to call it names, but I've had people who are like, I don't like this and you're going to change this or else I'm going to call you a public enemy. I'm like, hold on. Like you have a boundary. I can respect that. If you don't want me to talk to you, that's fine. But you don't threaten me on my Discord.
Yeah, it's your Discord.
That ain't happening.
No.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
It's like when being a teacher for years is like, you like to talk a lot in class. I'd say you like to talk a lot in class, or you like to do this, and the student would talk out, or it doesn't happen a lot in university, and I'd say I was the same way, and I said that's why I became the teacher. Keep your mouth shut, okay?
Oh, the extroverts must really love that one.
Nah, they would laugh about it. I would say it in fun because I was a fun teacher about it. But I'd be like, that's exactly why I became the teacher, because I want the floor.
That was a fun teacher. Dude, the fun teachers don't have to say they're fun.
I was a fun teacher for sure. I was more than trust me, it was a good time in my classes for sure.
Oh, you know what? I would probably have a blast in your class. My sense of humor. One of the best lessons I've learned, and then I'll throw it back to you. The best lessons is to stop caring about whether people like you or not.
Oh yeah, that's actually one that I learned teaching for years, because I remember thinking, teaching at university. I like I said, I thought like teaching's one of those things. There's teachers that have taught 30, 40 years. There's, you've been a student before, even if you haven't taught. There's boring teachers. There's teachers that are like by the book, textbook, grammar. I'm a player's coach. Like, you're going to be able to pass this class. We're going to joke around. We're going to have fun. I'm not too serious about certain things, different stuff like that. But I realize, though, even if you are the popular teacher, there's still some students that don't like you.
Of course. There's nothing. You will never satisfy.
You're never going to win the crowd 100%. And it was one of those things at first. I'm like, what's your problem, man? Everyone else is on board in here. You got a problem with me? It's like some people are like, no, I don't want a teacher to be laid back. I want him to be strict. I want to study grammar. It's like, okay, all right. So I would like to, though. It's funny because we're getting away from it now in California and whatnot. But I was just seeing like when you had group meetups, or you have an event where you talk to like TED Talks or things like that. I would love to do something like that in the future, to have a group like in California. But I'm like, now it's going to be obsolete, huh? Like a public speaking event.
Well, before I left California, I used to run a narcissistic abuse group here.
Okay.
I don't know if I should have said that out loud, because now people are going to try to find me. But yeah, I used to run a group where we had like 30 people, 40 people doing meetups, and like I would talk, other people would talk as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's great. It's great dynamics for group therapy. But
I think so.
I think you're right. I think we're heading in a direction where the technology is going to sort of integrate with our lives, both when it comes to work and comes to our personal lives as well. I don't think it's going to be absolute. I don't think people are going to stay home 24/7. But I've done remote work for the last 7 years. I've said many times. And I'm used to having this dynamic, and I'm used to forcing myself to go outside, because otherwise you're going to be a hermit, and you don't want that. You want to find that balance.
No. I always got to get outside. Yeah, no, I'll be mentally ill if I wasn't getting outside, and if I couldn't do that. People that do that, I'm like, wow. All right, folks, it's been good. It's been grand. It's been wonderful. Thank you kindly, Clutch, for hopping on for a couple hours. It was a lot of fun. And
Likewise.
It's curtains, folks. I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.
Cheers.